Hello and g'day! Today we're making beautiful vellum junk journal page ideas. These are absolutely gorgeous and they're so simple to do. I'm going to show you a couple of different ways. We're going to do the first one using a printed vellum. So the print will be going with the tea dye. And the second one, we'll be doing a printed paper with the plain vellum. And this is what the finished page looks like. So this is a piece of tea dyed paper and you've got the vellum here and it comes out on the other side exactly the same. And we're going to stitch it in and put two little decorative circles on the end of the stitches. So instead of cutting it off short up here, we'll just use them. And you don't need it to be too wide. It just needs to be about a third of the paper. It's not something that you need to have measurements for. Each book you make is going to be different. So my book here is about 8.5 inches tall. Your book might be 7 inches or 6 or 5. So you need to measure it to whatever the height of your pages are. So if this signature here is that high, well, that's how much you need to cut your page height at. This is the vellum that I got out of my mum's things. So you'll notice here it's got a crease from here to here. So I can only use this part for one thing and this part for another. So what I can do is if I've got a tall page like this, I know this is going to work quite well for this particular method. So I'm going to just fold it over to the damaged area and just crease it. Now this is my page and I only want vellum to come out to about here. I'll do that by putting my page in behind the vellum because I'm going to sew this piece into it here. This is what the page will look like when we finish this step. I need to measure out how wide I want the vellum plus add an overlap of 10 millimeters or so for the seam allowance. Now I mark how wide I need to cut my folded vellum piece, and that's got to include the 10 millimeters for sewing, and I'll cut it down here. I now have to have two separate pieces of the tea dyed paper to sew to the front and the back of the vellum. I'm just using my original tea dyed page and cutting off the fold line to separate the paper. These first bits I cut were far too narrow for my liking, so I cut them again. Even though this is not the rule of thirds, make it as wide as what looks good to your eye. Yeah. It's not quite the third, but because it's a narrow piece, I've made that adjustment. So I'm going to have one at the front and I'm going to have one at the back. So it'll end up being sewn and look like that. Okay. And that is the fold line that gets sewn into the signature. So now all I need to do is go to my sewing machine. I'll turn this piece over so the vellum is now laying on the top. Actually, what I'll do, I'll get the next piece done so that I go to the sewing machine once. So I know that that's going to be my first page to sew up. So I'll just put that aside. Now for this one here, it's going to be a little bit different because it's going to be for for this style book, because this one here needs to be folded a lot wider. The pages are a lot wider. My page width is 13 centimetres. So I know I need 13 centimetres that way. That's my fold line then. And then I've got 13 centimetres on the other side. And that's a cut line. But what I want to do is I want to put a piece of vellum in here. So that will be the vellum. And a piece of vellum in here. So that will be the fold line of the vellum. To make it easier, download this instruction sheet. The link is in the description below this video. So this piece of paper here, this print, only needs to be as wide as that and that, less the vellum and the overlap. So we'll start off by folding the vellum first, just so I find it's easier for you that way. I can cut it a different way and then add the allowance for the overlap and the sewing, but I want to try and keep you with me. Now let me see, I'm going to pick a colour. I'm going to pick this colour. I think this colour would look really nice with it. So I'm not going to fold it in the middle because I'll be wasting too much vellum. So I'm going to fold it back here. You can see here that my piece is not as wide as that. So I've got another piece left over to do another page if I wanted to. So that shows how wide this page is. So I only need just over 4.5 centimetres. So you do this as wide as your book page is going to suit where you need it to be. So I'm going to do it the same as that one there. Works out to be about 1/3 of the width. So this now is going to be the centre of my page. So all I need to do now is make it so that I can sew this onto this side here, and I need another piece. I'll match that up there, and I need another piece for the other side. So this time I'm matching this side. So I need to go from the cut line here back enough to be sewing it in. So I need to go past the vellum with the seam allowance. So I need 9.5 centimetres by 2 because I need one for the front and one for the back. Now what I decided to do on this piece was, instead of cutting it across that way and having my image go sideways when I put it in the book, it would have went like that, which is okay because we can do that with junk journaling. I decided to turn it around and cut it that way so that it's the right way up. And I could do that because I only needed 2 narrow pieces. So my paper was wide enough for me to get 2 pieces with the pattern going the right way up. So plan that out before you go a bit gung-ho like I did at the beginning. So now we just cut this off at the same height, and it will then need to be just trimmed down when it gets to be put in the book. So we'll put those on. I'll work out which ones I use, whether or not I want the bird cage or the bird. I'll cut this one first and then I'll decide. Really pretty paper this. This was my mum's paper as well. And everything she had was just beautiful. Oh, I'll get a little bit of the bird. Oh, which will I use, that or that? Oh, what about if I go in the middle? Yeah, there you go. I'm going to go in the middle, and I'm going to cut that off right there at the top of that. and I get the bird and the cage. Good thinking. So now I've got that, looks good. That goes in the middle and gets stitched over the top of that, which now makes me a full sheet of paper again. And then when I've got that full sheet of paper sewn back together, it's a page. And I just sew that straight into my journal. I'll get my sewing machine out and we'll sew these 2 pages up. Now before I sew this up on here, I just want to show you what I'm going to do to prepare it. On here I've put a mark 1 centimetre in, a very light tiny mark, and that's, I know that is going to overlap there. Now I need to be able to hold that together. I could hold it freehand because I'm used to sewing, but for you, what I want to show you is I'm going to use some of the Barely Art glue. It dries clear and it's really good under vellum. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a really thin couple of dots just on the edge, not where I'm going to sew, but just a couple of thin dots close to the edge, just to use them to hold it down, and they'll act a bit like a pin. You see those tiny little dots of glue there? There's one there, there, all the way down. I'll get that piece out of the road. Now I'll open this back up. It's really light, so you've got to work out which is the light side, right side, and which is the wrong side of this. It doesn't really matter because both sides are going to end up being my page. So I'm just going to lay this over on the dots, those very light dots there, 1 each end, and hold that down with that tiny dot of glue. Now it did disappear. If you think it's going to come away, just put a little dog clip on there. You can't really put one on the top end because you need to start sewing. So that's enough to hold it into place. Now all I'm going to do is a zigzag. If you want to do a straight stitch, you can. Now make your stitch long. I'm using 3 to 4. You don't want your stitches too close together. And I'm just going to sew now straight down the center of that 1 centimetre line. So where that line ends and of the vellum, and where the line ends here of the tea dyed paper, I'm going to sew straight down the center. I always hold my threads at the back here when I start to sew, and that is so that they don't get pulled in with the stitch. You can do a back stitch if you want, or you can just tie them off. And that's stitched up quite nice. I'm using a heavy thread in this because I want it to be a decorative stitch. So I'm just going to do the same on the other side, and see here I've left my tails on because I'll then work out which one is going to be the one I'm going to put the little decorative dots on. And there's my matching stitch on the other side. Or you can turn the vellum back the other side if you wanted the top stitch to be your first page you look at, and turn it back the other way. So I quite like it that way. So when I open my book, I see the top stitch first, and then the under stitch will go there. So how's that? Hey, it looks nice. If you want a smaller stitch, just adjust your stitch. I'll go smaller because this page is a little more dainty than the other one. And this time I'm not going to do a back stitch either. I'm just going to show you what it would look like if it was tied off. Now that's white on that side, but that doesn't bother me. I'm going to do some stenciling or something like that, something that's going to complement this. I've used a different colour thread on the top of my bobbin to the bottom. You can see the two different colours there. So I know that I can do something else here, either stenciling or stamping or just using some distress ink and just distressing the edges. There's so many things you can do here. I can put another book page beside it that will complement it. So isn't that a pretty page? Doesn't it look lovely? Using vellum as the center part of your page is just such an easy, beautiful way to make a different page in your junk journal. Now I'll just pack this up and I'll show you how to tie these off and make the little decorative discs. Now we'll tie the ends off. On this one, I'm just going to cut it because this is the one that I backstitched. All right, now I normally don't backstitch on paper because it bunches up like that. But I wanted to show you that if you want to, you can. So you just now come along and cut these off right up close to the stitches. And you do that on both ends, and you need to do it on both sides. So that one's just going to be left nice and plain with nothing on it. This one here, we're going to put the decorative discs on. So what we need to do is when you sew with the sewing machine, you get a top stitch and you get a bobbin stitch. This one is the top stitch and this one is the bobbin stitch, top and bottom. So what we can do is we're going to pull the bobbin stitch through to the back, and what happens is then you get a little loop. Can you see that little loop there? And when that loop forms, you actually get it and you keep pulling on the loop until it comes all the way and they're both on the one side. So now there's no thread on this side like there is here. It's been pulled through to this side. Once it's pulled through to this side, you then just tie a knot. It's a pretty simple step. So you've got both on the one side. Now if you wanted to make your disc decorative on this side, all you need to do is pull it through this way. It will happen exactly the same way. See, when you pull one thread, it forms a loop. There's my loop. And you grab the loop just with your fingernails and you just keep pulling it until it comes all the way through. And tie that. Do a double knot, especially if you're using upholstery thread, because it will work its way loose if you don't. You can even put a tiny dot of glue on there, or you can tie 3 knots if you really feel you need to. And then you just cut that off. Pull this one through again till when you pull it, it pops and makes a loop. Cut them off together, short enough but not too short next to the knot. So now I've just got a long one on this side, so if I want to, I can come in and put the decorative disc on that side as well. But for now, I'm just going to leave that one and decide about it later. But I'll just show you how to do it on this side. I'm going to use some tea-dyed paper and I'm going to cut, this is a 1/2 inch disc, and I'm going to cut 2 of these. But I'm also going to use this paper to cut the other side of it. So I'm going to cut them together because you probably already know that when you go to cut a single layer using these little hole punches, they never really cut out very nice. So if you put 2 pieces together, you get a much better finish, a much better cut. I'm going to get a smaller offcut so I don't waste that nice big bit there, and work out where I want that by turning it upside down. Whether I want a bit of both, all of these colours in there, which I do. And once I've got it to there, so now I've got a printed piece and a tea-dyed piece for my disc. I'll get a second piece, do another pretty piece again. And I've got the 2 there together. So all I'm going to do now is sandwich these 2 here inside of this. And that's pretty much it. But what I did on my other one was I actually done a little bit of distressing the edges, and that just finished it off pretty nice as well. See the difference in it? It just really gives it that nice vintage look. You don't need to come all the way into the disc, just get that edge done. Same with the back side. Now you need your glue. Turn your tea-dyed pieces over because you want the nice side showing. Glue them up so that you don't want your glue right to the edge, and you want a string of glue there for your thread to go on. Put your thread in the glue, put your top decorative piece on. Don't squash it down on your paper in case any glue comes out, and just give them a gentle push together. If you push too hard, you'll get a ridge where your threads are. And do the same on this one. Not too much squashing. I've cut the threads off this one. If I really wanted to go back and add threads and some discs to this one, I could get my needle and thread and push it through one of these and come back and tie that on, and I could still go ahead and do that, and I could do it on this side. So there's, no problem at all if you get a bit, scissor happy like I did and cut your threads off. You could go and add them back on. So I hope you like my idea of how to make a vellum and tea-dyed or a vellum and printed page to add to your junk journal. I'm Donna. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.